What's up, you guys? It's Patrick McCann from McCann Customer Modeling, McCann X Media, McCann this, that, and the other thing. Doesn't matter, all right? Because some fucking crazy shit just went down, okay? So just last night, the SBA put up their website where you can apply for the EIDL loans from the SBA, which stands for Economic Injury Disaster Loan, and it is crazy. So what I wanted to do today, because I've got way too much experience, all right, reading contracts and looking over contract law for my business because of my remodeling business. And what I wanted to do was something crazy, all right, because a lot of you guys don't know how to read contracts like this. So what I'm going to do is meet Kevin, awesome YouTuber, by the way, subscribe to his channel. He actually put out a section of the actual stimulus package, the bill that they wrote. He clipped the first 84, 73, something like that pages, and then he highlighted some of the important sections for people applying for either the SBA loan under the Paycheck Protection Program or the loan under the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, which are two completely different things. We'll go over that. But what I'm going to do is actually read through that first 73 to 84 pages of the bill that covers the small business part of it, not the whole 880 pages of the final CARES Act. We're not going to do that, but what I'm going to do is read over this and then talk about each of the sections that you guys need to pay attention to, because there's, like Meet Kevin did on, like he said on his channel in the past two videos, there's the potential for small business owners to just get a free $10,000. So it's really important, and all of you guys need to look at this right now. So we're going to get into it. All right, you guys. So what we're doing is we're basically going through Meet Kevin's version where he took the first 84-ish, 73. He took the first 73 pages of the stimulus bill, which is the part that relates to what we're talking about here for the small business loans. And he went through, and what he did is he highlighted a bunch of the different sections that he thought his viewers might find interesting. So he has an awesome channel. Subscribe to his channel. Totally stole this from him. Full credit. I'm going to post it in the chat, etc. But we're going to go through this, and we're going to talk about it from, I'm just going to talk about the different sections of the contract from somebody who writes contracts professionally, to basically see what we can learn from this and see if there's any underlying stipulations that we got to be aware of that we might not want to agree to, because you always got to be careful of the underlying terms and conditions. So you guys can follow along, and there's gonna be a link for this posted in the description. So just follow along, and we're gonna read through it together. So all right, so we're on page 1. We've got Division A, keeping workers paid and employed, healthcare system enhancements, and economic stabilization. So this is basically this is the section for the SBA loan type stuff. So if you're a small business owner, definitely pay attention, because what we're about to go over is really, really important. So the first section doesn't really matter. Now section on page 9, we're on section 1102, which is the Paycheck Protection Program. And this is these are the SBA loans that the government is letting banks underwrite. This basically just goes over what that is. So let's go ahead and get into it. So on page 9, line 1, we're on section 1102, which goes over the details of the Paycheck Protection Program. And there are two separate things I want you guys to keep in mind here. There's the Paycheck Protection Program, which is the SBA loan for that. And then there's an SBA loan for the EIDL, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. And those are two separate things. So if you apply for one, you can't really apply for the other. There's one stipulation, we'll go over that. But we're looking at the Paycheck Protection Program first. So if we scroll down to line 22 on page 9, it's the first section that Kevin has highlighted, where it goes over what the terms covered loan and covered period means. So a covered loan is a loan, it's an SBA loan under the Paycheck Protection Program that gets written. The covered period, it says, is from February 15th to June 30th, which is the period where you'll be able to apply for this. Now, keep in mind the covered period, what they refer to here, is actually a different covered period than what they're going to refer to later, and that's going to be a very important point, because we'll get to that. And then it just goes over who is eligible to actually apply and receive it, and then it goes over different definitions of like what payroll costs are. So the next stuff just basically goes over what a payroll cost is, and who can actually apply for it and what is covered. And it's very important to make sure that what you use this money for is covered, because that's how you're going to get it all back and not have to pay it back. And that's the main benefit of why you want to take these out, is free money. So all right, so then we scroll down, keep going. So his next section is, we're on page 12, line 2. He just talks about, it's still going over definitions and who's allowed to apply for what. So if you've got an employee that's earning more than 100K in annual salary, then you basically don't want to pay them with this money, because then you're not going to get it back. And keep in mind, I'm not a contract lawyer. If you're going to make any determination, I am not liable for Any decisions that you make based on anything that I say here, I'm just going over it so that you guys can better understand it from somebody who writes contracts and has to read them all the time. That way you guys who don't enjoy this sort of crazy stuff can get the benefit of knowing what it's all about. So then we're going to scroll down, page 14. Okay, so page 14, he's got the purple, shall be eligible to receive a covered loan if the business has, okay, so they were going over the terms, basically saying you're allowed to do this if you have less than 500 employees. It does say that a sole proprietorship or an independent contractor, so a 1099, or say if you're in the Airbnb business and you sublet your spaces on Airbnb, that should be eligible to receive a loan under the PPP section. Then we're going to scroll down, payroll tax, blah, 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 just letting you know what you have to do. If we scroll down a little bit, page 15, line 11, just lets you know which documentation you have to file in order to get it or what you might need to apply. Most of the important stuff that we're going to get to, and I've got my notes over here, which is separate from Meet Kevin's, is going to be in between pages around 40 to 67. That's like really where the meat and potatoes of this stuff is. So all of this, they're just laying out the terms and conditions, because keep in mind this is at the very beginning, so they have to lay all this stuff out and then they can refer to it later. And then we get down to the next section on page 18, just goes over how much you're going to be able to apply for, which you just take your average total monthly payment for payroll over the past year period before you applied, and then you multiply that by 2.5. So you're basically going to get 2.5 times whatever your monthly average payroll amount is, and that's what you're going to be able to apply for. That's going to be forgivable. And his next note on page 19 basically just says, okay, you're allowed to go up to but not exceed 10 mil. And then, okay, so this stuff is really important. This is where we start to get into the good stuff, which is we start on page 20, right? And this lets you know what you're actually allowed to use the loans for, right? So you have to make sure that you follow these guidelines if you want the loan to be forgivable, so that way you don't have to pay any of this money back. And that's going to be important because later on, 8 weeks after that your loan is approved, you're going to have to actually go to your bank, the one that underwrote the loan, and you're going to have to apply for forgiveness on this. And they're going to want to see all the documentation of the receipts that you paid for rent and utilities during the time period, that 8-week period, and then also all of your payroll. So make sure you keep extra good track of that. But all right, so let's go over this. So it basically says we can use all of this money for payroll costs, group healthcare benefits. So if your employer, or say if your business has group health insurance, you can use it for the premiums for that. You can use salaries, commissions, the mortgage interest probably won't be usable for most of you guys. Rent, and now this is very important, there is a stipulation in here later on that says the rent had to have been under lease on or prior to February 15th of this year. So my buddy and I, we actually signed a lease for a new office space that's going to start, or that started on March 1st. And our rents will not be reimbursable under this because it was after the lease, it was not under lease prior to February 15th of this year. So that's a very important stipulation. It also covers utilities. So if you have a home office, make sure that you're taking your home office rent and utility deduction. This will pay for that. As far as I know, like I said, not a lawyer, consult a lawyer, but as far as we know, this is what it says. So his next section, and this is also very important, we're on line 20 of page 21, which says, okay, so if you want to use this loan, or if you want to be able to get this loan, you have to have been in business prior to that February 15th of 2020, and you had to have had employees that you either paid a salary, so a W-2 employee, you paid a salary and payroll taxes on that employee, or you paid an independent contractor that you're actually going to file a 1099 for. So this is important if you're in the remodeling industry and you've got, say, electricians, plumbers, HVAC guys, because if they're working for you and they're 1099 and they're doing some subcontract work on a remodeling job for you, then the money that you pay to them does actually count for this, and then you can get reimbursed for that. So it's a very important thing for us to keep in mind for people that are in the remodeling construction sphere. Now his next stuff, it basically just goes over whether or not you can refinance and part of a covered loan, not important. But however, on line 18 of page 22 is where they have the non-recourse section, which is where they say that banks are not allowed to have you make a personal guarantee or to require collateral from you in order to get this loan. Because most of the time, if you want to get money like this from a bank, you have to either sign a personal guarantee to where if your business can't pay that money back, you become personally liable for it and you have to pay it back out of your personal account, or else you'd have to put up collateral. So real estate or vehicles or some form of equipment that then they would be able to seize and sell off in the case of in the case that you could not actually pay back the balance of the loan. And both of those are being waived for these loans. So that's very key. All right, so now we're going to get to page 23, proceeds for a purpose. So this basically says if you want to use the money and be able to get it paid back, that you do have to use it for these purposes that we talked about before. Let's see. So basically you're going to have to sign a waiver, or you're going to have to sign on the form that you are going to use these, that this money was required because your business was put at risk. And what that means is basically if your business had any form of financial hardship at all due to this crisis, which is pretty much almost everybody on almost every business, that you're going to use this money, like that's why you're applying for the money, and that you're going to use it to retain workers, maintain payroll, or make rent and utility payments. Voice is going out a little bit here, guys. We're just getting started, all right? We're on page like 25 out of 73, so bear with me because we're getting to the really important stuff soon. So then he just goes over he highlights the section under the fee waiver, which says that the government shall collect no fee for this. And let's see, it goes over again the fact that they're waiving a personal guarantee and collateral, which is awesome. Then it goes over, so he highlighted the covered loan shall have a maximum maturity of 10 years from the date in which the borrower applies for loan forgiveness under that section. That just means that the loan can't be dragged out for, say, 20 years like the student loan bills might be. So that's good. And then he goes over the interest rate that says it's not to exceed 4%. We don't know whether or not that's variable or fixed. If it's variable, it might go up. That's probably going to depend on the individual bank that's underwriting the loan. So I'll keep you guys updated when we go through the process if we choose to go for the Paycheck Protection Program route rather than the EIDL, which is what I would recommend for most of you guys if you're watching this in late March or early April, because that's where you might get the greater benefit of the free money that you might have coming to you. I had to get some water because my voice is going out. Okay, moving on. All right, so if you've been following along, we're on page 26. We're going to keep going here because we need to learn how we're going to get our free money from the government. So the next section that he has highlighted, again, we're on page 26, is that we have the option. So if you go to a bank, that's what they mean by lenders. If you go to the bank that wrote the loan, you can request that you have the payments on the loan be deferred for at least 6 months, including interest, by the way, including interest and fees, but you cannot delay it more than 1 year. Now that's important because a lot of people with student loans, you can get that deferred, or what do they call it? I don't know. But you can get that deferred for 2 months, and they're basically putting a stop payment on that, so that way you don't have to pay your student loans for the next 2 months and no interest will accrue. So this is an important section if you think that your business is going to be more affected than average by this outbreak, that you do have the option to delay your payments for 6 months to a year. Then page 27 just goes over who can buy and sell your loan, so it doesn't really affect you. Page 29, and still more about buying it and reimbursing the banks who are actually underwriting these loans, because that had to be included in here as well, of course, but it doesn't really pertain to us so much unless you're a bank. Okay, page 31, very, very important here. So there have been a lot of people, myself included, that have been wondering, so when you're writing a contract and you're going to request a loan for a certain amount of money, sometimes you'll have a fee or some form of disincentive to let you just pay that back immediately, because a lot of people with the PPP or with the Paycheck Protection Program might be filing for a loan of, say, like $30,000, even if they only need 20, and then they're going to use as much money of that as they can in that 8-week covered period. That would be forgiven. They're going to use all of it for payroll and rent, and any money that they have left, they would just be able to pay that back immediately rather than waiting to pay it back over time as the loan matures. So they've got in here that if you want to, say after the 8-week period, or even as soon as you get the loan, I guess, I don't know why you would do that, but basically you'd be able to take any remaining money that you have left over from the loan that you didn't need to use, and you can pay that back immediately to get rid of the loan, and there will be absolutely no penalty for that. And that's a very important thing, because sometimes there is, and it's something to keep in mind, especially for the EIDL loans that we'll be talking about later. All right, the next few pages don't really impact us all too much. Feel free to skip them. Goals and metrics, report. I'm scrolling down, I'm on page 39, and we are following somewhat Meet Kevin's highlighted sections of this, but there's some other sections that he didn't highlight that I want to make sure that you guys know about. If you are, it's sort of like I recorded a different video on this about the paycheck continuation clause that might be in here, and Kevin did not highlight that, but I want to call special attention to those of you guys who might be paying payroll for this and are wondering what happens if, say after the 8-week period, the crisis just gets worse and you have to lay off employees again. What happens then? Is all the money that you use still forgivable? So we're going to go over that in a little bit. But we're on page 39, scrolling through page 40, 41. Okay, so section 1106, line 10 on page 41, it goes over the loan forgiveness. And this is going to be really important because the terms laid out here is what lets you know whether or not that you're going to be able to, how much of the money that you spent you're going to be able to get forgiven by the government and not have to pay back. So they start off basically with more definitions, and we'll go over this shortly, but they actually change some of what their definitions are in some of these sections. So it's very important to read carefully because specifically what I'm talking about is not here, but later on they change. Okay, right here actually. It is right here, sorry. Line 24 on page 41 changes for this section. The term covered period now means, instead of being the covered period before, which we went over on the first or so page, which said the covered period is from February 15th until June 30th. And that's when you're allowed, that covered period means when you're allowed to apply for this loan. Here in this section, covered period means the 8-week period beginning on the date of the origination of a covered loan. So once your loan is approved and you get the loan, then the next 8 weeks is now what is being deemed the term covered period. And this is very important because in the next section on page 45, if you'll scroll down, okay, so we get to line 7 on page 45, which sets the limits on the amount of the forgiveness. Now, what this basically says is that if you reduce the number of your employees during the covered period, so for this section, the covered period is that 8-week section beginning immediately after you get the loan and the loan period begins. If you reduce the amount of full-time equivalent employees that you have during that time period, it will reduce the amount of the loan that is forgivable. So if, for example, if you have 5 employees in your business and you're paying some of that, so you've got 5 employees in your business and you're paying their payroll for all of them for the first 4 weeks, and then you let one of them go, the amount of payroll, the difference, the spread in between what you were paying all 5 of them and what you are now paying the 4 of them that remain, what you stopped paying in payroll will not be forgivable because you reduced the amount of your full-time employees, which therefore then reduced the amount of which then reduced the amount of the loan that became forgivable. And remember, you have to apply for all of this later, so they're going to have proof of whether or not you had these guys on payroll the whole time. And I'm actually going to go over on the whiteboard, I'm going to go over the math on this a little bit because it is a bit confusing, and I'm going to show you exactly what this means because it's a very important corollary that Kevin did not actually highlight here. All right, guys, so 2-minute math lesson, because we're on line 13 of page 45, which talks about how the amount of your forgiveness can be reduced if you reduce the number of your employees, or have done so recently. So this is basically part of the paycheck continuation clause thing that I was talking about. This one does not actually have exactly a paycheck continuation clause, but we're going to go over exactly what this means because this could potentially reduce the amount of the loan that you would be able to have forgiven. So what this says is, let's see, in general, the amount of loan forgiveness under this section shall be reduced by multiplying the amount described in subsection B by the quotient obtained by dividing some shit. So let's go ahead and lay out the quick terms. So you've got the forgiveness amount. So this is the amount of the loan that you'd be able to get forgiven. We're going to call that the F. So we'll just call that F. It's the forgiveness amount, which is going to equal all your payroll, rents, and utilities. So all the stuff that you were going to plan on getting forgiven, we're going to call that F, all right? And what this is going to say is that your F will be reduced by multiplying it by some quotient. We'll call it C. If you're wondering what a quotient is, literally a quotient is just any number that you get by dividing any other number by any other number. So you've got your numerator, your denominator, and then a quotient, it's any fraction number. So that's what a quotient is. And what they're doing is they're gonna multiply a quotient by your forgiveness amount, and that is determined by A over B, where A is going to equal, I promise this will get easier to understand if you get lost, but A, so the numerator in this equation is gonna be the average number of full-time equivalent employees employed during the covered period. So we'll call this number of full-time equivalent, we don't want to use capital F, sorry, full-time equivalent employees employed during the covered period. So that's going to be the 8-week period, 8 weeks after you get the loan. My handwriting sucks, I'm sorry, but so A here is going to be the number of full-time equivalent employees employed during 8 weeks after you get the loan, and then B is going to be, it's actually your choice. So you get to pick between the number of full-time equivalent employees employed during, and this is a different time period, this is actually the same time period that you can apply for the loan or the same time period from 2019. So it'll be from February 15 of 2019 through June 30th of 2019. Or the second option, and you get to pick, is same number of full-time equivalent employees from the time period of January 1st through February 29th. So January 1st of 2020 through February 29th of 2020. So if, for example, say during the period of the covered loan, which is the 8 weeks after you are approved for the loan, you have, we'll use just a random example of 4 employees. So right now you get the loan and you've got 4 employees that you're keeping on payroll. Now you get to choose between the number of full-time employees that you had last year during this time period or that you had this year before. So say last year you had 10 employees, but you laid a bunch off in December, then you would not want to pick this option, you want to pick the second option. But just say for an example, you have 4 right now, and you had 10 during this period of last year, then the amount F would multiply it by this fraction, which would give you only 40%, which basically means that you're going to lose 60% of the forgiveness amount. So not good. But say if you had, say you've got 4 employees right now, and you only had 3 before, so you actually hired somebody new after February 29th, and right now you've got before you had only 3 employees, then this would equal 1.3 repeating times F, which would actually increase your forgiveness amount, but they say that it can't increase your forgiveness amount. So you always want to pick whichever amount, you always want to pick whichever number makes C as big as possible. So basically just take the amount of however many employees that you have during the covered period, and then you divide it by either of these two. You'll get some fraction that's less than 1. Usually if it's greater than 1, don't worry about it. But if you get you'll get a fraction that's less than 1, and then you multiply it. So say you get 0.6 repeating because you have 4 out of 6 ends up being your C, which equals, okay, so I'm gonna redraw that because that was crappy. 4 out of 6 equals 0.6 repeating. Then you would take F times C, and then you're gonna get your amount of forgiveness reduced by 33%. So that's some quick maths on how that works. So the next section, we're still on page 46, going down line 20, is how you calculate the average number of employees. And I'm gonna be completely honest with you, it looks like a gray area of how you actually determine the amount of full-time equivalent employees, because they say it shall be determined by calculating the average number of full-time equivalent employees for each pay period falling within a month. And they don't really elicit, or they don't really tell you at all that I could find what a full-time equivalent employee is, because I know that a full-time employee is generally considered in between 30 to 40 hours per week. So how they're going to determine how many full-time employees you have, especially when a lot of employees' hours are getting cut. Seems like some gray area because part-time employees are employees too. So that I'm not sure really what they're going to do. And in section A on line 5 on page 47, it also says that the amount of the loan forgiveness under this section shall be reduced by the amount of any reduction in total salary or wages of any employee described earlier during the covered period that is in excess of 25% of their total salary or wages during the most recent full quarter in which they were employed before the beginning of the covered period. Okay, and what this section says is basically, if say you've got an employee that you pay $15 an hour for 40-hour weeks, right? If they go down to 30 hours per week due to lack of demand or you can't keep them employed for 40 hours, if you cut their hours or if their hours get cut down to 30 hours, then all of their wages are still going to be forgivable. But if you cut them below 30 to 29.5 or below, then any amount that they get reduced in wages below 30 is that amount is just going to get removed from the amount that you can get forgiven for the loan. So say if they go from 40 hours at $15 per week, I'm not going to do math on camera, but if they do 40 hours, $15 per hour, and they go down to 28, then there's going to be 2 hours times 15, I guess $30. So you're going to have $30 of that loan amount that is then for that time period not going to be allowed to be forgiven. We're going to skip over page 48 and 49. It goes over some stuff that, quite frankly, I don't really understand, but it has something to do with an exemption of where if you have employees before February 15th and then you, or they have to get laid off, they go on unemployment, and then you rehire them again before June 30th, that somehow does not affect the amount of your loan forgiveness that you'll be able to take, which seems like it's in direct contradiction to the info before, so I'm not really sure on that. All right, guys, so I actually cut this out for today on page 50 because my voice is going out, and I have a business call in about 10 minutes, and I really need to shower. This is taking me a lot longer than I thought it would. Hopefully, so far, this has been helpful for you guys. I'm going to go over part 2 tomorrow. It's going to take us from page 50 to 73, or maybe extend it to 84. And we're going to go over the rest of this, and that's what covers the EIDL, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, which is going to be key for a lot of you guys. So sorry it's taken me so much longer than I thought it would, but we're going to get through it. Going to help you understand what this actually means for you. Boom, my voice is going out. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow.